Well, anyway, this theory of the golden mean promotes moderation in all things. So that's the key to his views on morality. It's a form of moderation. So the question now becomes, how do you know what is moderation and whatever, in trying to answer a question about what is moral or not. And his answer is interesting. He says, moderation is not exactly halfway between extremes. So for example, he says, honesty is not halfway between lying and tactlessness. You know what tactlessness means, don't you?
Right.
What does it mean?
If somebody says you look fat and stressed, you say, no, you look wonderful.
No, it means you are fat and stressed. Yeah, that's it. Means you have no filter. Yeah. So he says honesty is, and he says in healthy eating habits is not halfway between starvation and gluttony.
Right.
So now the question, so big deal. How does that help me to know what's moral? And he says there's no mathematical equation for it. You have to use sound judgment, and you can't just split it down the middle. There's a name for that. It's called trimming. When somebody confronts a difficult situation, they're trying to figure out what to do, so they just cut it in half. It's not splitting it down the middle. You just have to use judgment and discretion, instinct. And then once you get an idea of where you're going, then you have to practice it. That's what he says. So that's what a moral person is, someone who aims to be moral, tries his best, avoids extremes, and then practices it. Isn't that interesting?
He talked about the two different means. One of the passages we read, he said there was the mean overall, but then there was the mean for you personally. And he said, like, if you're more inclined towards rashness, then like you should aim to be more cautious. And he, like, the way he explained it, I liked, was he said it was like a bent piece of wood. He said when they try to bend the wood, when they try to straighten it out, they don't just straighten it, they bend it back the other way in order to straighten it.
Another example that you could think about when you think about moderation is, do you play an instrument?
No.
Does anyone play an instrument here?
I do.
What do you play?
A little bit of everything.
You play the guitar?
I do.
Well, how do you get the strings right on a guitar?
You have to tune them.
Well, but my point is that if it's too tight, it just blings. If it's not tight enough, it makes no sound.
And it stretches.
So
They
you
warm up. You have to
just have to
retune
have
it.
an ear. You have to have an ear for it.
Yeah.
And then practice. So if you're looking for 1, 2, 3, 4 equation on how to be moral, he says you can't get it.
So something else I thought about was he talks about the philosopher kings have to have the greatest like insight, right? They have to look ahead and understand where they are between the past and present, right? More than anyone else.
You don't mean philosopher kings, that's Plato.
Yeah.
Rulers, you mean?
Well, I guess I was thinking more Plato with the being able to see towards either
So
side.
you're talking about Plato now?
Yeah, jumping.
Did you study Plato too?
We read Euthyphro, but that was it. It was part of the excerpt of Euthyphro at the very start. We talked a lot more about Aristotle, but I was thinking with Plato, wouldn't they, if you're trying to find like moderation and you're trying to think ahead about things, wouldn't you be more inclined?
But Plato's not that interested in moderation.
No.
That's what makes Aristotle a conservative and Plato more of a radical. It's Aristotle who's the king of moderation.
Okay.
The philosopher king of moderation. So I don't know if that helps you or not, but that's it. It's look for the golden mean, identify extremes, and look for something in the middle. But there's no shortcut to it. You just can't chop the extremes down the middle, and you have to have some instinct and discretion and judgment.
We read I liked his account of morality better. We read the other two were Kant and John Stuart Mill, which we've already read, but their explanation for morality seemed strange.
Because they have a different view of human nature than Aristotle.
Even so, when we think of like morality without any scholastic idea, when you just think of it just like common sense morality, neither one of their explanations would seem to come anywhere close.
It really is common sense, but as everyone knows, it's not that common. You have to be a person. Isn't that interesting? Practice. It's using the example of a guitar or tuning a piano really does fit. You can't teach somebody to tune a guitar. You kind of give them some direction and then they have to figure it out for themselves. And then you have to practice. Nobody is moral naturally. That's the view of human nature that he had. So we want to talk about the separation of church and state in the United States, and the two main figures are Thomas Jefferson and Roger Williams. Roger Williams was at the beginning of the 17th century, and he comes to Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1631. Of course, Thomas Jefferson had an illustrious career throughout his life at the end of the second part of the 18th century. And they both believed in separation of church and state, and their views are incorporated into the First Amendment. But they came at it from different angles. You remember, Jefferson wasn't particularly a religious person. The closest he came to religion was something called deism. Have you ever heard that term, deism? Have you ever heard that term?
Yes, sir.
What do you think it means?
It's more like agnostic, where you just believe in like a higher power.
It's a religion of reason. You come to God through thinking about God, thinking about the possibility of God, and then you reach the conclusion, supposedly through reason, that God exists.
Does that make Aquinas deist?
No, because all of the miracles in the Bible therefore go out the window. There could be no resurrection, there could be no parting of the Red Sea.
No virgin birth.
No virgin birth. No God speaking to Moses in the wilderness. So what you're left with is just some kind of...
Isn't that what Jefferson actually wrote?
He rewrote the Bible, isn't that
Without
amazing?
miracles.
And he took all the miracles out. Imagine that. He was afraid that he was afraid of what was going on in Europe, where a majority religion in a country would take over the government and then deny the right to dissenters. And what they would do is they would make what is a sin in their religion into a crime. So, for example, if you violated the Sabbath, from a religious point of view, you're going to hell. But when you have an established church where the majority religion takes over the government, you go to jail. Or if you sleep with your neighbor's wife, from a religious point of view, you go to hell. But when you have an established religion, you go to jail.
See, a few states still have adultery in the books as a crime, but I mean, nobody enforces it.
Until recently, all stores in Alabama were closed. Remember those Sunday closing laws that existed in the South for centuries. So he was interested in, Jefferson was interested in separation of church to protect individuals from religion, to protect free government ruling over free individuals from religious bigotry. But Williams came at the subject from a completely different angle. He wanted to protect religion from government. Jefferson wanted to protect government from religion, and Williams wanted to protect religion from government. But they reached the same conclusion. So the First Amendment says you can't have an established church. These are the first words of the First Amendment. And also you can't violate individuals' religious freedoms. So the established church comes from Jefferson. That clause comes from Jefferson. And the part about not violating an individual's religious freedom, that comes from Roger Williams. And this issue is in the news now. In Alabama and Mississippi and so, for example, if you work in the marriage, if you have a civil service job, remember, happens to be in the Marriage License Bureau in City Hall, right? And the Supreme Court has said that you can't deny homosexuals a marriage license, but that violates your personal religious beliefs. Many states have laws allowing that director of the Marriage License Bureau, working for the local government, you understand, taking a salary from the people to say, sorry, we're not giving you the license, even though it's legal according to the Supreme Court of the United States. So your father would say, it's in the Constitution, right?
Right.
The government can't take away your religious freedom. And that issue is in the papers every day now. Then there was the example of someone who was in the business of making wedding cakes. Homosexuals came in and wanted the wedding cake. They said, sorry, we're not selling you a wedding cake. So what would Jefferson say about that?
About which one? About the
Both.
case?
Well, do the easy one first. Let's do the head of the Marriage License Bureau working at City Hall.
What would Jefferson say
Yeah.
about?
Well, just call me when you're ready to visit. Get in the car, relax, and
I'd say Jefferson would say that you probably want to keep
yeah.
their religious beliefs out of.
And what happens if the person says, I'm not doing it?
I don't know. I guess maybe Jefferson would replace him with someone else.
They get
You
fired.
have to be fired. And why? What would be his explanation? I just want you to see the views of these two different people.
Because you are putting your personal views over, you're letting your personal views interfere with government business. Your personal religious views interfere with government business.
When you work for the government in a pluralistic society, that's his point.
Right.
You can't choose one religion over others, or you can't choose religion over people who aren't religious. What would he say to the family who owns a bakery?
Thomas Jefferson?
Yeah, that's a harder one. You can't fire the people who own a bakery, it's their bakery. Do they have the right to deny selling
Yes.
it? Huh?
He would say yes.
Thomas Jefferson.
I think so.
I think so because it's a private business.
Well, let's put it this way.
Okay.
Let's put it this way. During the Civil Rights Revolution, right?
You're right, yeah.
And did a diner have the right to not? They were racist. Did they have a right not to allow black people in the 1950s and 60s to eat at the diner?
I mean, if it's your business, it's wrong, but
Well, we know what the law is. What happened?
Well, I think they interpreted the Commerce Clause to say that, because it's connected with interstate lines, the government has the right to regulate.
But it also was the 14th Amendment.
Yeah. The
Can
equal
somebody
protection.
brief me on what we were just discussing?
We're
The
talking,
bakery.
talking about the examples of separation of church and state, and we using a current event where the manager of the local government marriage bureau refuses to give a marriage license to a homosexual. And then also another example, the Hobby Lobby, but also there was a family that operated a bakery that refused to sell a wedding cake to a homosexual couple.
We're trying to decide how Thomas Jefferson would respond and how Roger Williams would respond. Starting with Jefferson. We're on Jefferson now.
So what do you think?
Well, that's what we're asking. So, hello. What about, so what should happen to that bakery who refuses to give? How would you look at it? Forget about Thomas Jefferson, for example. It's great to see you again.
Good to see you. I certainly think that the government has a compelling interest in making sure that businesses are open to the public and making sure that businesses do not discriminate. I think that's very important. But I also understand freedom of conscience, and I understand where these bakers and these photographers do come from. As for the issue of probate judges, they certainly should be compelled.
Well, that's
to issue
an
licenses.
easy one. It's the bakery.
It's the bakery
Yeah.
one that's very.
Well,
I understand.
but it's in the law. Tell her what the law is.
Well, if it comes up in court again, I think they would interpret it as they would in the civil rights movement with the equal protection and the Commerce Clause, because
Two different parts.
Yeah.
Two different parts of the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 says that if you deal in interstate commerce, if you ever sold a cake, if you have a bakery in Alabama, but you once being married in Mississippi, now you've crossed state lines, and now it's not just a local issue, it becomes a national issue. And the Constitution of the United States applies. And there's also the 14th Amendment that requires everybody to be treated equally.
I know that there's been several courts who have ruled on these matters, and they've found that it's a violation of their state constitution's non-discrimination ordinance. For instance, they've compelled photographers and bakers and wedding venues. There's been several cases under the state law.
Yeah, but that's Oregon. We're talking about Alabama, where it's not
Oh,
against the state law. So basically what Jefferson would say, let's get down to the basics here, he'd say, if you can't, as a government employee, if you can't treat everybody with respect, then you can't work for the government. And as someone who owns a private business, if you can't do business with everyone, then you shouldn't own the business. I mean, that's what he would say. If you have these strong beliefs and you can't foresee that you would find yourself in situations that you would interpret as too difficult for you to handle, then get another job. Both legally and from a common sense point of view. Your doors are open to the public. Roger Williams would reach the same conclusions, but he says you're making a mockery of religion when you do that kind of stuff. So I wrote some notes here. He said, remember, the Puritans leave England in 1620 because they're rebelling against the established Anglican Church. And Puritans aren't Anglicans, they're Calvinists. Puritans was the name given to the English Calvinists. So they were being discriminated against, and oftentimes they were going to jail because they, remember, in an established church, they don't distinguish between sin and crime. So they decided finally they couldn't stand it anymore, so they came to this country to seek religious freedom. In what was supposedly a rebellion against the established church. Tell me your name again.
Sir.
So within the 5 days, what was the first thing the Puritans did out of hypocrisy?
Made their own
Made
religious
their own established church.
religion.
Yeah. So Williams, also rebelling against the established Anglican Church, comes here and he can't, he doesn't know what's going on. In those days, the continents were separated by this wide ocean. There was very little news about what was going on. He came here seeking freedom, and he found he couldn't find it. Even though he was a Puritan himself, at least at the time. Later on, he changes. He tinkers with the Baptist religion, and etc. So he starts preaching. He has his own church, and he starts preaching against the Puritan established church, and get him. So he escapes from Massachusetts before he goes to jail, and he founds a new colony called Rhode Island. And he makes it clear that all dissenters are welcome. And so all the dissenters start coming from Massachusetts to Rhode Island. Quakers, and Baptists, and Jews, and Congregationalists, they all start fleeing and coming to Rhode Island. Williams was a governor. If he would see a Quaker on the street, he would get up into his face and say, if you don't repent and become a Calvinist, you're going straight to hell. He had no problem with that. He had no problem with that, huh?
I thought that was predetermined.
That's true too. But you didn't go to jail. See, that's the difference. William was a religious zealot. He'd get on your case as governor, but person to person, you didn't go to jail. You were free to do whatever you wanted. You would just kind of cross the street if you saw Williams in your neighborhood, because he really would get on your case. So I wanted to make that distinction. He said, there are so many different people living in Rhode Island now, and all of them believe in God in different ways. So the first pluralist society in America had been established with all these different agnostics, atheists, Quakers, Baptists, Congregationalists, Jews. So he said, I have to find some way to make law that would be common to all of them. If I asked you about God, you'd give me an interpretation, you'd give me another one, you'd give me another one, etc. He said, now let's try this. How much is 2 and 2? 4. How much is 2 and 2?
4.
4. So he said, we'll use reason as our standard for law. He said, that's the only fair way to do it in a pluralist society. When a majority church uses religion, he said, so that was just common sense. Now he had to explain it from a religious point of view. He said, when an established church representing a majority of people in a community make their laws based on their revealed revealed faith, what they're doing is they're forcing non-believers to go along with their belief. He said, true Christians can't do that because it violates what lies? Free will, which underlies all religious faith. This is what he wrote, forced worship stinks in God's nostrils because it's not true worship. It's not true belief, it's not authentic and genuine. So that's what he meant when he said, I believe in separation of church and state because I fear what the government will do to the authenticity of religious faith. He used the metaphor of the garden and the wilderness. The garden is supposed to represent the religion as a bastion of moral rectitude. And he used the wilderness to represent easily corruptible government. Have you ever grown a garden?
I've tried to, it wasn't very successful.
Well, what is it that you have to, what are the forces that make it difficult to grow a successful garden?
Harsh weather conditions, rodents,
Yeah.
I don't know.
What about weeds,
Weeds,
bugs?
yes, definitely weeds and bugs.
Well, all of those things are part of the wilderness. So he said if you want to protect the morality of a church, you have to keep it as far away from the wilderness of government as possible. Otherwise,
government was the
all the
weeds.
fruit and vegetables, what you're seeking in the church will be destroyed. He said even at its best, government requires compromise. That's what many of these Republican candidates don't seem to understand. Even at its best, government requires compromise. But a truly religious person, he said, they're not allowed to compromise their faith. So that's the point. If you refuse to sell cakes to people you don't like, then get into another business, because if you're operating a business, what did you call it? Interstate commerce? Yeah. So people are asking Williams, where in the Bible did you get this idea? So he goes to Matthew 22:21. Do you remember it? Do you remember it? Here's what's happening.
First word.
Here's what's happening. Christ has pissed off the Jews because the Jews
They're backing him in a corner.
believe in a Messiah, huh?
Are they backing him in a corner, trying to get him to say which is
They want to try to get him in trouble with the government, with the Roman government.
Yes.
Pilate. They're angry at him because the Jews believe in a Messiah. And their belief in a Messiah is that when Messiah comes to earth, all earthly suffering will disappear immediately. So they have been praying for a Messiah for thousands and thousands of years. Now here comes Christ, and he identifies himself as the Messiah. But their feet are still hurting, and they're having trouble with their boyfriends and girlfriends and wives and husbands, and having a hard time paying the rent. So they see this guy as, as being a false Messiah, which is about the worst thing you could do in the Jewish religion. So they want the Roman governors to kill him, get him out of there. They're not going to murder him, but they want the Romans to do it. So they want to try to trick him into making a mistake. Right? So this is what happens. A group of these Israelites approach Christ in public, and they say to him, look on the coins that we're using here in Palestine. They have the picture of the
Caesar.
Roman emperor on it. So aren't we practicing blasphemy when we use these coins? Aren't we saying in effect that Caesar is higher than our God? And isn't that a sin? So then I'm trying to find 22:1, and I'll read you the passage. Remember, they're trying to corner him, have him make public statements, like Donald Trump, get him into trouble, right? So that Pontius Pilate will murder him for speaking against the emperor. So this is what the Israelites say to him. Matthew 22:21. Tell us therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not? By using everyone has to use coins. You want to buy a wedding cake, or pay for a marriage license. And Jesus perceived their wickedness. He could see that he's being set up. And he said, "Why are you tempting me, you hypocrites? Show me the money you're talking about. Show me the tribute money." So they brought him a penny. And he said to them, "Who is this image on the penny?" And they said, "It's Caesar's." So what's the famous quote? What does he say to them?
Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's.
He says, "Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God." So William said, there it is. If you're looking for a biblical justification for my garden in the wilderness metaphor, it talks about an absolute separation between religion and government. There it is. I don't understand what he's talking about. And this is what he meant. He said, "At the heart of my faith is the doctrine of original sin. People are born sinners. That originates, why are people born sinners according to Christ? It originates, it derives from
The fall of man.
the original sin. And that sin stains all newborn. It's a pretty radical view of it. Christianity is the only religion that ever existed that believes something like that. You're guilty at the time you're born. So Christians have to have a negative view of human nature. Because it's obviously not, although it's possible through your lifetime to somehow get around that original sin, it's not going to be easy. Therefore, life in civil society is always going to be difficult. It's always going to be marked by anarchy. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. And therefore, if you want to live long enough to somehow get into the practice, to be on the path to undermining this original sin and getting right with God, you need more days and weeks and months and years in your life. But with all this unrest in civil society, you could be murdered at any time. Do you follow me so far? People who have no intention of getting out behind the original sin. So now we know why you have to render unto Caesar. Because the government provides the order in society by which you can have extra time to try to make peace with God. And that's absolutely necessary. It's absolutely necessary for your secular life, but as you see, it bleeds off into religion.
What does he mean by render unto God what is God?
Oh, but the government, he's telling us, which is absolutely necessary to bring order to society, should have no role in creating order in your soul.